So for those of you who are on already, welcome. Welcome. Thanks for being here so early. I would love it if you could pop into chat where you're joining us from. What city, what state, what room in your house. That can be a wild answer these days. Some people have joined us in a closet, you know, wherever you get some privacy. Ramsey, New Jersey from your home office. Thanks, David. And I'm in Morristown. In a quiet corner of your basement in Astoria, New York. Thanks, Tom.
Great morning, everyone.
Good morning, Letitia.
How are you guys doing today?
Welcome.
Thank you.
Really well, really well. How are you doing?
Oh, I've been great. It's been pretty awesome.
It's been awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I have a bunch of kids in the house, so between homeschooling and just having fun with them,
Wow.
and trying to get business going, I could only enjoy it.
Wow. What a beautiful mindset. What a beautiful mindset.
Thank you.
Much respect for those who are homeschooling on top of working right now. I truly don't know how you're doing it, but that's incredible.
Thank you.
Erica,
Yeah.
I'm gonna put, let me see if I can do something. I'm gonna send you a message in the chat. Can you take a look at it?
Yeah. Good morning, Phyllis. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
No, I'm assuming that I'm sure it's a lot.
Hey, Jack.
Yeah. That's the problem we had at the last meeting.
Jack, you're not muted.
Erica, you have control. Can you mute him?
It's not actually allowing me to mute him right now.
I know. We had that yesterday.
Hey, Jack.
We're gonna have an,
Yeah, it won't let me, it won't even-
there's gotta be a way, and I tried calling him and he's not picking up.
uh-huh. This is very strange.
I know.
Okay.
We're gonna, that's the thing that we had before.
That's what it is.
Hey, Jack.
I'm gonna mute myself and try and reach him again.
Okay, good. I just put him in a waiting room. That was the only thing it would let me do.
How did you do that?
If you, well, as a host, you can scroll over more, and there's several options, and one of which is you can put them back into a waiting room.
Just keep him in the waiting room.
I'll keep him in the waiting room and then, bring him back. And if it's still happening, I'll put him back in the waiting room.
I'll email him. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
I've been trying to reach him and it was, I don't know why that was happening, and I will explain it to him.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
Sure. So I think we've got,
No, we couldn't even get to the waiting room. It wouldn't allow us to even do anything.
all right.
So,
Erica, that was a good trick. Now that I know what to do when it happens on my end. Thanks for the learning tip.
We're dancing with the technology, right?
Said we learn something new every day. And now I know I can put you in a room.
That's the timeout room.
That's the timeout room.
Jack is on punishment.
So
That's real social distancing.
I know, that's the real deal, social distancing. Shall we kick this off, Helena? Or
Yes,
Tom or
definitely.
Bob?
It's 11 o'clock. Good morning, everyone. I'm Helena. I'm the Executive Director with the Greater New York Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to our second Small Business Friday. We are, especially during this, I don't like to have it as a negative. I think there's a lot of positive that does come out of COVID. There is more opportunity for us to interact. I find instead of being on the subway or traveling around, you're in the comforts of your home or your business. Hopefully everyone is safe. And it's an opportunity for us to really zone in on more small business skills and small business opportunities for your business. So right now I am going to turn it over to Erica from Insperity. And again, we appreciate you hosting this fabulous webinar.
Thanks, Helena. And then I know Tom. Well, you know what, Tom? I'll introduce myself. We're just going to dance. We're going to dance this morning. Have your dancing shoes on.
All right, I'm gonna go get them. They're right next to me.
Okay, great. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I think it's a big deal that you're here and that you're carving out the time, truly carving out the time to really zoom out, to take a moment to zoom out about 30,000 feet, to do that pause, that strategic pause, to kind of look and reassess, like, how am I doing up here? Am I working at my optimal? Is my brain really sharp? Am I harming? Am I under too much stress? And is that causing adverse consequences for myself, for my health, for my team, for my family? So I think it says a lot about you that you're here and that you care to grow. So I want to actually ask if Tom or Bob, I'm going to be throwing out a few books not a laundry list, I promise, but a couple of books that are just extremely powerful tools. I know I've got a lot to cover in 20 to 30 minutes, and we will have about 15 minutes of Q&A at the end. But here's what I'd like to offer you. My email address is right here on the cover slide, erica.wood@insperity.com. There's so much that we can say about the science of trust, the science of these power skills of empathy, the positive health benefits on ourselves, the positive health benefits for others, how it increases trust. I mean, we can talk into any one of these different verticals for an entire hour by itself. So I'd like to offer a complimentary call with any one of you. I'm going to have a deadline of about a week. So, we have about a week. Feel free to reach out to me offline if you want to go deeper into any one of these topics, or how do I apply this in my team, or how do I incorporate this into my one-on-one meetings, or what are the implications of this in my feedback discussions? Am I having the appropriate amount of praise versus constructive criticism, and what are the implications of that on performance and on trust? So I'm happy to have a one-on-one call with any one of you. Again, if you reach out to me in the next week, we'll get on the calendar and handle this, because there's just so much to cover, and this is a very rich topic and one of my own personal passion. So we'll cover an overview of some of the key neuroscientific principles that really underpin effectiveness, effective leadership, and it's all based off of extensive experience and extensive years. By the way, so let me just give you a tiny bit of my background. Over the last about 5 years, I've been studying a lot about the neuroscience of leadership. And more specifically, and by the way, if there are really specific neuroscience questions that you have, I'm not a neuroscientist. I've studied a lot, but I'm not a neuroscientist, but I'm happy to forward those questions on to my mentor. His name is Dr. Dan Radecki. He's a neuroscientist, but he actually is the founder of the Academy of Brain-Based Leadership. So I love that he's a neuroscientist who he can actually explain what the implications, what's going on in our brains, and then how to be our healthiest, most effective, and the implications of that on communication, on delegation, on influence, on motivation, on good stress versus bad stress. So I just want to highlight a couple of pieces. And there will be some very practical brain-based strategies that you can implement as a result of this. But the first thing I want to kind of highlight is I want to debunk. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir, and some of you already get this, but I'd like to debunk that these are soft skills. There's nothing soft about them. They're pretty difficult. They're pretty difficult to build. They're critical, and they take time and effort to really strengthen. And they really provide the possibility of real power on your teams, at work, and really, they take extreme effort to obtain. So, but they are skills. Some people may have a more natural tendency and a natural leaning for empathy, and for others, it takes some work. I'm constantly working on this, constantly building this skill. So I would just invite you that, wherever you are with regards to this, that you really try on a growth mindset. And Tom and Bob, if one of you can kind of retype in the name of a book into the chat when I reference it, this is one I would recommend. And it's based off of Dr. Carol Dweck's work, D-W-E-C-K, Dr. Carol Dweck. She's a professor who's really well known for her decades of research around something called a growth mindset. And the name of the book is called Mindset, The New Psychology of Success. So could easily have an hour-long conversation just around the power of a growth mindset, but she discerns between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. A growth mindset knows that there is always something to learn. Even if I know it, knowing is not power, knowing is potential power. Am I applying what I know? That's real knowledge. That's real wisdom, and that's where the real results will actually be shown. But, another case study that I'm hearing, because we've, at Insperity, we have clients from various industries, and some clients are in healthcare. And expressing empathy is highly effective and powerful. It builds patient trust. It reduces anxiety, and it has been shown to improve health outcomes. I know a friend of mine now has an emotional intelligence section when he was, going in pre-med. As part of their learning, they actually have to understand emotional intelligence and empathy are crucial for supporting health outcomes. And it's also a key driver of patient satisfaction. So let's kind of jump right in here. So again, if there's a piece of anything that I cover that you say, oh yeah, I've heard that before, I know that, what I would invite you to look at is, am I applying this and how can I apply this? I love, one of the most quoted lines from Bruce Lee is, I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. It's really emphasizing the importance of continual focused practice as a way of honing and strengthening and leading to a high level of proficiency. So what we're going to do is we're going to leverage the wealth of knowledge here. I invite you to write down questions or write down examples, or if, hey, I've dealt with this and here's how I got through it and here's how I actually exercised empathy to navigate that difficult situation with that client and here's the result. These examples are really powerful in the field. And I'll share a painful one of what not to do. We often grow and learn from what not to do and from mistakes. So what I really do invite us to kind of leverage the wealth of knowledge in this room. And just know that with consistent application, you are creating a new habit. It's correlated to creating new habits. Neuroplasticity means that our brains are plastic and malleable and always changing. I know there's some people that say it takes 60 days. The most recent study I heard is 66 days of consistency to really establish a new pattern, a new practice, a new habit. But consistency is key, application is key. So from whatever we cover, take what works, throw away what doesn't, and make this your own and bring it to your own teams and your own families. And I just see there's a couple people who aren't on mute and I don't. Okay, great. All right, now the mute button's working. All right, so first we're just gonna go an overview of the brain, really high level overview of the brain, just so we know kind of where we're going and understanding kind of the why, the foundation of the why behind all of this. Then we'll talk about the power skill of empathy. One of the least automatable. It's one of the skills that I'm also hearing in the tech space are actually gonna be even more crucial to be future ready. There are many skills that will be replaced with AI, with artificial intelligence. Empathy is going to take a lot longer to be able to program, but that's where we need humans. And fortunately, these skills can be coached and they can be learned. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about, there's good stress. So let's pop into the chat really quickly. If you've heard that not all stress is bad, I kind of just want to gauge, some people hear me say that not all stress is bad and they're surprised, but just pop in the chat really quickly if that's a surprise to you, that not all stress is bad. There's something called Eustress, Eustress, which is actually the good amount of stress, the right amount of stress, that our executive function of our brain needs to be sharp, needs to be present, needs to be effective, and needs to actually exercise empathy. Empathy resides in the executive function of the brain. But then when we're under too much stress, it throws that off. Empathy goes out the window, impulse control gets out the window. More on that in a moment. Let me just gauge with the chats here. Yes, a certain level of stress is good. Not surprised. For some of you, surprising. New concept, but I felt that. Yes, yes. Not all stress is bad, but we'll talk more about this in a moment. And then we'll talk about the science of trust and wrap up by no later than 11:30 to really allow 15 minutes for Q&A. Q&A is my favorite part. It's where I get to learn and hear more in the field of what you're dealing with and what you're holding. Never has it been more important to have this conversation. This is one of the most prominent conversations now. I know there's some talk out in the field where, well, we're being forced to exercise empathy now in these conditions. And I would say, no, you're not. It's always a choice. There are some people who now consider it vitally important, and they're choosing to now lean into more empathy as a matter of building trust and meeting people where they are. But some people resist. So here's what I invite you to do to make this the most powerful 20 or so minutes, is just consider one behavior to adapt from the entire conversation. One of the other aspects to note is, what are my triggers? If you know your triggers and you can get ahead of them, then you can be way more effective in the conversation. And what's the 1 millimeter shift? Could be just a tweak. How can I use this? You know, where will you put your focus on for this session? You know, how can I use this with my teams? Why must I use this? Why is this important? If we're connected to why something's important, we're far more likely to exercise and put that in action. And when will I use this? You know, if it's in your calendar, it's real. If it's in your meetings, it's real. So I just want to highlight a couple of main areas of the brain. And any neuroscientist will tell you that as much as we know about the brain, we know very little about the brain. But just for the purpose of this conversation, I'm going to focus on the amygdala, which I know we're all very familiar with. It's kind of in the limbic part of the brain, 100 million years old. So it's an older part of the brain evolutionarily. You know, when we have a fight, flight, freeze response, that's a small almond-shaped organ in the limbic system of the brain that immediately releases adrenaline and cortisol through the entire brain. So it has a pro-inflammatory response. And what does it do? It kind of distorts, makes faulty, and sometimes completely causes the executive function of our brain to go completely offline, the prefrontal cortex. So the prefrontal cortex is the higher brain. It's the newer brain. It's newer evolutionarily. I think the estimates were 4 million years old. But that's where our reason is, our logic, our strategic thinking, our long-term planning. And it's also where empathy resides. So when we're in a fight, flight, freeze response, empathy goes out the window. I know one of the big aha awareness for me is when my empathy goes out the window and I'm not exactly concerned about how someone feels or thinks. I know I need either to get a walk outside or take a pause or take a break, do some breathing, but the conversation is not to be had in that moment, that's for sure. So now some of us have more of a fight response to stress. Some of us have more of a flight response to stress. We avoid, we shut down, we leave the room, we sequester ourselves in the office for the rest of the day, but we all need different things to restore. And some of us have a freeze response to stress where it's truly paralysis of analysis. But irrespective of which response it is on the outside, the same thing's happening to all of us from a neurological perspective. This is not an exhaustive list, but this is a list of some of the functions of the prefrontal cortex. Pursuing goals, our impulse control, it's our braking system. Specifically, the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex is the braking system. It's the part of our brain that's like, probably not the time to give my employee this feedback right now. I'm a little heated up. Probably not a good idea to say what I really want to say right now because it could cause way more damage. It might feel good for about 15 minutes and then it's going to feel awful for the next 2 months. So that's the braking system. The good news is that you can exercise this. You can make it stronger through a process called hypertrophy. Hypertrophy is just cells get larger as they're exercised. So the good news is that the more I proactively exercise empathy and I put myself in their shoes and I try to understand what they're going through, it's strengthening that part of the brain. So this part of the brain is also responsible for your memory recall, your memory encoding. So if your memory gets fuzzy or you're kind of foggy and you just can't make quick decisions and you can't practice good judgment, that's a good sign that indicates that you probably need a break. But this is a bell curve. So I want to kind of now go into what is this eustress versus distress bell curve. And for more, if you want more research or you want to look more of her information online, her name is Dr. Amy Arnsten, professor at Yale School of Medicine, and she's done extensive research on the prefrontal cortex and the just right. So she's created something that's called the Goldilocks bell curve, which is just a bell curve indicator that we need the just right amount of stress to be sharp and fully online. For our executive function to be fully online, we actually need the just right amount of stress. So right now, I feel like I've got some butterflies and I've got the just right amount of stress, but I know that that's when I perform at my best. If I didn't get enough sleep, or if I was back to back, or any number of reasons, if I'm on the distress side, I might completely lose my place. I might forget what I'm saying. My impulse control might go out the window. I'm not making as clear decisions. I mean, the consequences are huge. So some questions I would invite you to begin to ask is, because again, self-awareness is paramount. What are the red flags that might tell me that I'm on the too much side or too little side? So let's talk about this for a second. So if you're on the too much side or too little side, what Dr. Amy Arnsten found is that the impact is exactly the same. It's interesting. Whether you have not enough stress or if you have too much stress, the consequences are the same. Your executive function is not going to be as sharp if it's even online. And some consequences could be black and white thinking, rigidity, judgment, criticism, just general foggy thinking, poor impulse control, bad memory recall. Like you're like, I know the answer to this, but I am just blanking. Lack of empathy. The big one's lack of empathy. And that's one of the pieces I want to concentrate on in this particular conversation. But another powerful question I would invite you to write down is, what are my triggers? You know, we all have various triggers. And if you're aware of your triggers, man, that is powerful. That is powerful. You know, I know some people get triggered by suppressing what's going on. You know, suppressing them does not make them go away. It's actually the worst thing that you can do, and it creates more stress. What's pretty powerful, what they're finding in terms of what it does to them, when you just name what you're going through with a trusted colleague, a trusted friend, a partner, someone in your family, a spouse, a best friend, maybe your manager, if you've got a tight relationship with them, but just the naming of what you're currently going through actually decreases the electrical activity in the area associated with the amygdala. So it has a calming effect. Researchers call it a tend and befriend response to stress. Instead of a fight flight, the tend and befriend response to stress alleviates anxiety, and it elevates motivation, and it releases oxytocin, that bonding hormone. Again, that sense of feeling like, okay, I trust you. And what might bring you back to the optimal range? And we all need different things. You know, some people, if I have a high level of transparency by my leader and a high level of transparency by my team, I feel like I trust them. For some people, it's, you know, I just need to know that there's equity in our conversation and everybody in this meeting has an equal amount of time to talk. Fairness has massive neuroscientific implications. If you see something is unfair, it activates the insula, the part of the brain that gets activated when you feel physical disgust. So this is, you know, this has many implications. And what we're finding now about the social brain is that the brain gets fired in the same region when it feels social pain as it does when it feels physical pain. When we feel connected, trust goes up. When we feel we don't have trust, people hoard information. They don't collaborate. They protect. They hoard. So I know we're all probably familiar with the acronym HALT. I'm not going to make any decisions or have any crucial conversations if I'm hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. So that's a good indicator that my executive function of my brain is probably not going to be sharp. It's not going to be online. So throw in chat really quickly. Tell me what types of difficult conversations you avoid if you feel so courageous. Empathy is one of the most empowering ingredients to have when having difficult conversations. What is a difficult conversation? Anything you find it difficult to talk about, whether it's giving constructive feedback to a peer, to an employee, if it's disagreeing with the majority of a group because you think we actually need to go that direction. It could be apologizing, but these are ripe for discomfort, and the conversation might be difficult. The other person might become emotional. One person might criticize or judge. But what we found is that the reason people avoid these is because they don't want to feel uncomfortable. At the end of the day, we don't want to feel uncomfortable. But empathy is the most powerful way to actually lean into the discomfort and actually build trust. Another book I recommend that goes way more into depth on this topic is Difficult Conversations, How to Discuss What Matters Most, by Bruce Patton, Sheila Heen, Douglas Stone. And this is based off of 15 years of research around the Harvard Negotiation Project. And they found, I mean, they provide a step-by-step process, but they found we can't have these difficult conversations until we're willing to practice empathy and put our biases to the side, put our assumptions to the side. And one of the assumptions we could be making is that they had bad intentions. That might be an assumption we have to put to the side and come from a place of curiosity. Simple to say, not easy to execute. So I want to define empathy really quickly. So empathy is merely the ability to experience and understand someone else's world. Now, it doesn't mean psychologizing with them. So if Tom was to get upset with Bob, you know, me saying, well, I think Tom's doing this because Tom has issues with men who wear purple ties. You know, I think that's probably, you know, whether or not that's valid or true, it's not empathy. It's psychologizing. Empathy is also not necessarily agreeing with people. I see that get colluded a lot. Empathy does not mean you agree with people. It just means you understand what others feel. Another powerful book on this topic, if you want to go deeper, is Chris Voss, V-O-S-S. And his book is Negotiating as if your life counts on it. Never split the difference. Never split the difference. He's a former FBI hostage negotiator, investigator, retired, but he did it for, I believe, nearly 25 years. And he says the only thing that got him through those really difficult conversations was what he referred to as tactical empathy. I don't agree with the person who's holding all of these hostages at gunpoint in the bank, but I am not going to get through to him unless I understand his world and put my world to the side for just a moment. So again, not agreeing with people and also not allowing that person's trigger to trigger or derail you. Oh, I hear somebody is, I'm going to mute you, Gustavo. Okay, beautiful. And empathy is also maintaining a clear discernment of your own and the other person's feelings. So again, it's just understanding, yeah, that sounds really frustrating. It's understandable that you're frustrated, but not you getting frustrated because maybe you have that same trigger or that same complaint. So some foundational practices and some very, very actionable things that you can put into practice is, you know, where can I relate? Where have I struggled with this situation in the past? You know, we've all experienced loss, suffering, humiliation from failures. We've all been there. So as much as possible, unifying and seeing how can I see the similarities, or where do we have similar values? And one of the very simple things that we can all tap into right now is that everybody, all of us, regardless of whether we've been personally affected by COVID or not, we're all experiencing some form of loss and suffering and failure, and now getting to the other side of that, beginning to get to the other side of that. There's a powerful quote by Dr. Martin Luther King that says, you have very little morally persuasive power with people who can feel your underlying contempt. Very little morally persuasive power with people who can feel your underlying contempt. So even if you're just going through the motions and having an empathetic conversation and you're judging them or criticizing them, they will feel it on some level. All of us can. We have a gut brain, hundreds of millions of neurons in our gut. So when you have a bad gut feeling about something, it creates this cognitive dissonance. All of us have that. So as much as possible, coming from a place of curiosity, like a scientific researcher, looking at this as information. I'm just learning about this person. I'm just coming from curiosity. So I want to show just a really quick clip highlighting compassionate leadership. And this is Jeff Weiner, the CEO of LinkedIn, interview with Wisdom 2.0. And at the time of this interview, his ratings on Glassdoor were the highest of any CEO.
And someone's doing something that upsets you or frustrates you, we all have a natural tendency to become very emotional. Yeah. And part of managing compassionately is having the wherewithal to be a spectator to your own thoughts, especially when you become emotional, and get a little bit of that distance. And enables you to put yourself in their shoes and ask yourself, why are they behaving the way that they're behaving?
And that there's a wisdom potentially or a rightness to how they're behaving. Or,
it could be a wisdom. It could be, in your parlance, a rightness. It could be a wrongness, but they're not to be blamed for the wrongness.
Yeah.
It's not a... When you're in the moment and someone's doing something that upsets you or frustrates you, we all have a natural tendency to become very emotional. And part of managing compassionately is having the wherewithal to be a spectator to your own thoughts, especially when you become emotional, and get a little bit of that distance. And enables you to put yourself in their shoes and ask yourself, why are they behaving the way that they're behaving?
And that there's a wisdom potentially or a rightness to how they're behaving. Or
it could be a wisdom, it could be, in your parlance, a rightness, it could be a wrongness, but they're not to be blamed for the wrongness.
Yeah.
It's not a blame game. If they're angry at you, maybe they're angry by virtue of something that took place years ago that had nothing to do with you.
Right.
And when that anger comes your way, the knee-jerk is going to be to become angry in response.
Yeah.
Now, they're angry and you're angry, and guess what happens? I mean, every single one of us has been in that situation probably every day. Someone just wrote me an email the other day, and they were angry about something.
Yeah.
And I knee-jerked, and I was frustrated, if not outright angry, that they were expressing themselves like that.
Yeah.
And then I took a minute before I responded, thought to myself, I wonder why they're so emotional about this. And what can we do about it? And I ended up getting on the phone with them, and I said, are you trying to solve a problem, or are you just trying to vent? So, well, I'd like to solve this problem, but I think it's too late. And as a result, I'm very angry. I said, it's never too late. Let's focus on solving the problem. And then after that, let's come back to how you expressed yourself.
Gotcha.
Because I think it can be done differently, and I want to better understand, all kidding aside, I want to better understand what pissed you off so badly. And
But
let's
you don't
work
just
on
let
that.
it slide.
No, never. That stuff compounds on itself.
Yeah. Okay.
No,
So it's not about like,
right.
oh, they must have had a hard day, I'll forget about it.
It's, well, when you say, it's interesting. When you say let it slide, it's like let them off the hook. I see it the opposite, which is if you don't go there, you've lost an opportunity to improve the situation, to coach them, or to provide yourself some coaching and learning where you'll be better positioned the next time it happens to understand what's going on.
Okay.
So kind of in closing, and I know I saw there's a couple questions that came in, and we're definitely going to get to those in the Q&A. So Tom, if you can just remind me of the questions that came in during the session so we can really address those. Kind of putting this all together is that, awareness of where you are on that bell curve. Am I too stressed to have this conversation right now? That is very powerful. That pause is everything. And as much as possible, getting in a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. A growth mindset is this is a skill that can be strengthened, and really standing in, I wonder why that person's so upset, instead of going right into our assumptions, can be very, very powerful. So the final book I'll be recommending is Dr. Paul Zak. He's a neuroeconomist, a scientist, and he's really well known for his work around applying neuroscience to effective leadership and to building high performance teams. And he found that there were, these key things that are crucial for really building trust, strengthening trust, and empathy he had as number one. So the book that is here, The Science of Creating High Performance Teams, and what he found in terms of low trust companies versus high trust companies. So high trust companies report 74% less trust or less stress, 106% more energy at work, 50% higher productivity, 13% fewer sick days, 76% more engagement, 29% more satisfaction with their lives in general, 40% less burnout. So if I haven't sold the power of empathy in building trust and the importance of trust in high performance teams, I don't know what will. But again, as I said before, and this is my brain coach, Jim Quick of Quick Learning, he's the one that was deemed for saying knowledge isn't power. It has the potential to be power if you apply it. But really bringing awareness around your triggers, around those physiological red flags that might tell you this is not the time, you are experiencing too much stress right now. If it's jaw pain, neck pain, our bodies are a very intelligent feedback loop system if we pay attention. And again, it's an awareness practice. It's an awareness practice. So I think I'm going to pause there. I would love to talk for another hour and really hear from all of you and have this be more interactive. I usually prefer much more interaction, but I'm going to pause there, and I'd love to hear what questions are out there, or even comments, or here's how I applied this in my teams, or here's how I'm, working out the implementation of this now with my team. So would love to hear from you.
Erica, the one question that came up during the presentation was, wouldn't empathy be considered natural or an essential leadership skill for a team leader?
Yes. So at first I thought you were asking, is empathy natural? And I would say for some people it's a natural strength, and for others it's something that really needs to be built and honed. Then I heard the entire question, but I also wanted to address what I thought you were asking. Yes, absolutely. The best leaders or the best team leaders, the best leaders in general, are those that know that they don't know all the answers, and that's why they surround themselves with really smart people. I had a mentor once say to me, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And to really leverage the intelligence on the team, you got to understand that everybody has different strengths, and that's actually where we get to unify. Where can we, the 80-20 Pareto principle, right? Like, where can we focus 80% of our attention on getting stronger where we're already strong, which is also way more motivating and fun. But also be aware of the 20% where we've got some liabilities that we need to manage too. We need to be aware of where we're weak, and then as much as possible outsource those or leverage someone else's strengths and really bring them in to plug the holes where we're weak. Sumit, yes. Are we trying to solve a problem, or are we angry? Yes.
That was just my quick attempt at trying to paraphrase Jeff Weiner. It was quite interesting, and we do get that problem all the time. But I think one of the things that I would like to hear from you is thoughts around inspiring other organizational leaders of today and the future. And that would be in our organization, but like as we go out into the world also, right? I mean, we meet, not just we meet, and sometimes we hear our leaders, I mean, for example, in Congress and everywhere else, we're just like talking about things which don't matter.
Yeah.
They take things out of context and like create a negative impression in everybody's mind. And not just that, I mean, look at our media. How do we change that?
Yeah. You're reminding me of a quote by Buckminster Fuller, who said, "We don't change the current paradigm by fighting the current paradigm. We change the paradigm by creating a new one that renders the old one completely obsolete." So one of the things that I'm trying to impart, and by the way, I'm seeing a ton of evidence to the contrary of what we're seeing in 24/7 media. And 24/7 media, let's be honest, they get incentivized monetarily to have the limbic brain activated. It's the older part of the software in our brain. So it responds really strong to fear, and it can be addictive. But I'm paying more attention to the thought leaders and the tech experts and the Peter Diamandis of the world, who I believe is a co-founder of Singularity University, and he has a whole source of medium, I think it's called Future Loop. And all they do is share data-driven, optimistic news. It's all they do. And I am incredibly inspired by hearing what a lot of innovators and leaders are doing out in the world. So I guess it's going back to, do we want to continue building our strengths? We obviously want to be aware of what's not working, but where can we build ourselves even stronger and focus on putting out that there's actually another way we can operate here. There's another way we can lead here. And it's becoming even more and more important that we realize that people are humans, they're not robots. I mean, we are going to have more AI and more AI and more AI, but that's actually going to only heighten the importance of empathy and really building these connections. So I'm not sure if I actually did that address what you were
It did. The first sentence, we're going to change the paradigm.
Yeah. Thank you. Great question.
We got another great question in the chat, actually. For someone who shows little to no emotion, how should they handle the process of being empathetic?
Yeah. So I would first, again, one of the components of empathy is meeting people where they are without at all trying to change anybody. I just can't help but think of the metaphor of Chinese handcuffs. If you're not familiar with Chinese handcuffs, like the more you pull and the more you resist, like the tighter it grips on you. The same with people, the more we resist or judge who they are and how they express themselves, that's not empathy, that's judgment. And that's a fixed mindset about who that person is instead of a growth mindset. Like maybe there's more I need to learn about this person without them needing to change in any way how they express themselves. You know, one of the powerful tools we have at DISC is, at Insperity is DISC, and it's just understanding that we all have different communication styles and different preferences and different motivators depending on what our style is. And if we understand that some people are just diametrically opposed in their preferences and their communication than us, the more we're likely to kind of lean in. Okay, great, we're different in the way that we see this, but how can this actually create a competitive advantage for us on the team? You want healthy conflict. Healthy conflict is good. Unhealthy conflict is, you know, I think we're all familiar with that, the gossip, the water cooler conversations, but healthy conflict is good. Again, that book, Difficult Conversation, goes into a really great approach that's research backed in terms of how do we have these difficult conversations, because you have to have them. Sweeping it under the rug, it just builds. It just builds until one day it's an avalanche, and then it blows up and it can create more harm. So the first place I would say is to meet people where they are, and really just come from a place of curiosity. Scientific researcher, what can I learn about this person? Maybe write out what assumptions am I making that they express themselves this way? It took me a while to realize that my older brother, he's not a hugger. When I hug him, it feels like I'm hugging a 2x4. Man, he's brilliant. He is brilliant. He's a tech whiz. He's a scientist. He's a data-driven dude. And man, I love him. He teaches me all the time. And he's not a hugger. And he doesn't express emotions. And it doesn't mean anything about him as a person. That's a great question, Letitia. Anything else?
I have a question. So for better or worse, I'm the face of our company. I'm in direct sales. And so I send out emails to people that usually start with, you know, I hope you're doing well. I hope everything's fine on your end. Occasionally I've been getting back the emails, you know, this family member has been diagnosed with COVID-19, or we've had this tragedy, that tragedy. I've been very fortunate in the sense that I've worked from home for over a decade. My family, while we've sheltered in place, is relatively healthy. How do I respond to those kinds of replies that I get back without sounding trite?
Just the very question, David, already says a lot about your empathy. But the one piece I would highly recommend, and we didn't go into the communication piece too much, but we can have a whole half hour just talking about the different modes of communication and what has a stronger impact when you're trying to unify in these difficult times. And email is the least effective. Email is the least effective out of every single mode of communication. They don't get your tone of voice. They don't see your face. They don't hear the volume of the voice, the inflection. And so much gets misconstrued when it's via email. You put a period and somebody's interpretation is that it was too blunt. You put an exclamation point and someone thinks you're yelling. Email is the least effective. So the one piece I would highly recommend is that you look at what is the most important mode for this conversation. And the strongest is via video. So you can see your, visual stimuli gives us a lot of feedback about more of the context behind what someone's saying. And so body language and visual stimuli is the strongest way of understanding what someone's saying to us. And then the delivery, the tone of voice. So the next in line behind that would be over the phone. But the least effective would be email. And I would just recommend, one of the things the leaders are now practicing, especially in the last 2 months, is having weekly one-on-ones with each person on the team. That's 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, just no business, but just connecting human to human What do you need? What do you need? How are you? Are there resources that you need? Is there support that, how can I help? How can I help is a really powerful question that's rooted in empathy. And sometimes good old fashioned mirroring back what they're saying. Chris Voss talks about this in the FBI investigator. Very powerful just to mirror someone back, even just the last 2 to 3 words of what they said and say, oh, wow. So it sounds really overwhelming, the circumstances you're dealing with. Anything else? Anything else? That's a powerful question. Anything else? You're not necessarily having to fix their problems. You're just there to meet them where they are and understand their world. But it's such a beautiful question, David. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the answer.
Yeah. Yep. We've got 2 minutes because I know we have a hard stop. How to address fear of retaliation among employees when simple reassurance doesn't work. So I'd love to ask you a question about that question. If you'd like to unmute, Svetlana.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is, I represent a big company, and I just wanted to, what I noticed that people just would rather be yes men and don't say what they really feel, even though, and everybody in the room may feel the same thing, but they do not address it.
Yeah.
I think it's a very common issue.
Very common issue. Thank you so much for bringing this up. I know we've got 1 minute, but for more research around this, look up Dr. Amy Edmondson, Edmonson, Dr. Amy Edmondson. She coined the term psychological safety back in 1999. And then Google did a study in 2016 to look at what are the key characteristics of high-performing teams. Psychological safety was #1.
Absolutely, yes.
Psychological safety is #1, meaning that people feel safe to offer ideas. They feel psychologically safe to raise their hand and offer another opinion. Psychological safety is the birth of innovation. And if there's no psychological safety in the room, or it takes one person in that team to compromise the safety for the entire group. It takes one. And it's not always the leader. It could be a teammate. Absolutely. And their behavior's not being addressed, and it needs to be addressed because that's affecting results. It's affecting results.
And what is interesting, each survey has this question: do you feel comfortable to present your opinion? And everybody say yes. Most of them, at least.
I might recommend starting having one-on-ones and doing kind of like a pulse, getting a pulse. Amy Edmondson has questions, by the way, on how to actually define psychological safety and assess whether it's present or missing on your teams. Highly recommend it.
Right. No, I'm pretty good at my team. I sense the temperature, so I use those things. But in a bigger environment, it's a little bit of an issue.
Yep. One team at a time.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
So
you.
important.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you, Tom, for hosting. This has been very informative. I thought this was fabulous. If you guys have any questions, put it in the chat. I'm going to send Erica and Tom a copy of the chat. So if you can put it in. Unfortunately, I would love to continue this, but we're doing seminars or webinars every hour on the hour, and we're talking about PPP loans at 12 o'clock. So again, thank you, Insperity, for hosting. They're a huge supporter of small business, and without them, we could not put a conference on like this. So again, we really appreciate your continued support with the Greater New York Chamber of Commerce. And they are going to get a copy of everyone that was in the webinar, and also a copy of the chat. So they'll be able to follow up, and you can, contact them directly. So their email address will be in the information that will go, Erica and Tom will reach out to you, I'm sure.
Thank you, Helena. Thank you, everybody. Stay resilient.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.